we're discussing specifically the Iranian factor in this Syria calculus. Should the United States take action in Syria or not? And there are many who have suggested that we should take action in Syria to thwart the Iranian influence. That if we lose
Many meaning me.
Okay, we'll go with you to make it first person. To suggest that that if we do not act in Syria, Iran expands its sphere of influence. But I would say to you, what makes it different than today or yesterday or 5 years ago? But Assad has always been a client of.
Well, no, that's that's an absolute question. I want to bring our guest in here because I think that's a question I want to throw right at him to give us. Joining us tonight is Jonathan Schanzer, Vice President for Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Jonathan, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So I think you heard that question. What about this relationship in Iran? What makes it different? What say ye to Will's argument?
Well, there's nothing different, and I think he's right that this relationship has been ongoing. We've been aware of how important Syria has always been to Iran. It is a transit area for weapons, for cash. It's been a training area for Hezbollah, for Hamas, for Palestinian Islamic Jihad, for a host of other groups that are all clients of Iran. And so, when we talk about things that the United States might gain through an attack on Syria or a sustained war with Syria, it would be the weakening of what we call the Iranian axis of resistance, and that includes Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, and that host of other groups.
So just to be clear, Pete, to Jonathan's point, what we're doing now is we're assessing gains to be made by action. We're not talking about something that should necessarily compel us to action, but if we do, we might be able to break this link between Tehran and Lebanon of Iranian influence. But it's not something that we have to look at and go, oh my God.
No, I think
that sounds like a political calculus and not a humanitarian one.
No,
that's
right.
Trying to gain an additional
I actually think it's an absolute strategic calculus. What you've got is intentions and signals toward an Iranian regime. If you
draw it's a strategic calculus that existed yesterday, it existed a year ago, it existed
sure, all you can do is read tea leaves and signals. And if you have a signal in Syria that a red line can be crossed, what does Tehran?
That's a different argument.
Well, no, I think it rests right there with what the president said. The president said a chemical attack that is a red line that we will not allow them to cross. And he made a statement to the world. And now, if he doesn't act on that statement, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. If he doesn't act on that statement, what is Iran going to take from that calculus? What is the rest of the world going to take from that?
Well, I'll ask Jonathan that. To play on Sarah's point, do you think that it's a worthy cause for us to engage militarily in Syria, to save face for the president making a statement which I think was probably a wrong one a year ago, setting artificial red lines? I mean, because to save face, I don't think is a reason for us to get involved militarily at this level.
No, absolutely not. There's no reason that we should go in if it's just to help the president save face. If we're talking about, stopping the mass slaughter of more than 100 or even 120,000 people, well, that's a reason. I have to say that the killing of 1,300 people doesn't bother me as much, even if it was done through chemical weapons, as that larger death count bothers me. And so when we talk about the reasons for going in, there are strategic reasons, there are national interest reasons for us to go in, and I think first and foremost among them would be weakening that Iranian axis. That would be my primary reason for going in, yet that's not been what we're talking about. Right. And when we talk about the war plans right now, we're hearing from the Pentagon that there'll be 50 targets that will be struck. None of them will be chemical weapons targets. They'll all be military targets that will basically be telegraphed in advance. This is not going to stop that relationship that we do need to break up. This is going to be a slap on the wrist, and therefore I see really no reason to go in at all.
So listen, Anthony, I don't agree with Jonathan's calculus that this is an opportunity to break the Iranian sphere of influence. However, as much as I'm opposed to any kind of action in Syria, count me among the 60% and the two of you that want to do nothing. I do recognize Sarah's point. I think it's a different point, and that is President Obama, through running his mouth, has put us into a position where we almost have to act. His mouth has cashed checks that his butt doesn't want to cash. If we do not act in Syria, we might have to act in Iran or in North Korea. Yes, I agree.
Well, when they see this message,
because I think that the problem here is that and Pete, you before this whole Syria thing came up, saw Iran as a threat. Anybody that sees Iran as a threat is going to see an opportunity here. I see the statements about attacking Israel if the U.S. does anything in Syria as a lot of hot air, in the exact same hot air that Iran has been blowing for the past several years, and that there's no additional additional threat.
Don't you-
No. I think there's an actual threat to Israel here, and I think we can't underestimate that threat. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu has a reason to feel threatened.
And I don't want to hash out the Iranian threat here. That's not the point. I'm just saying, like, where you're coming from initially is how you're going to see this.
No. Shouldn't the United States words carry weight?
Yes. So I think that the United States words would carry weight, but the question is with who? Yes, it would be embarrassing. Like, to your point, it would be problematic potentially in Europe, but in the Middle East, with individuals, maybe in Turkey, individuals who don't want the United States having more aggression, actually stepping back and saying, you know what? We said this and we're not going to. We might actually win.
But Jonathan brought up a point, and Will too. We can't just go. If we go, you go in just for a few steps.
Well,
you have to go all the way.
That's a question I want to bring to you, Jonathan, real quick. Iran is the big fish. What action, if the U.S. truly wants to influence Iran's calculation through an action, what is the action that you think would most influence that calculation?
Well, I mean, I would take out Assad entirely. In other words, if you're going to go in, you're going to punish him, you're looking at what he's been doing, right? I mean, this is a state sponsor of terror since 1979. This is a man who's been, he and his father have been sponsoring terrorist groups since that time. He's got that relationship with Iran, and we know that state is crucial to Iran's operations throughout the region.
And Jonathan, therein lies the conundrum, because taking out Assad opens up a whole nother bag of worms.
Massive civil war.
That's more than a message. That's you break it, you own it. So, Jonathan, we really appreciate your assessment tonight. Thank you.
Pleasure.